Well, now we go back to our security matters, and security expert and chief executive officer of the security firm Bacon Consulting, Dr. Kabir Adamu joins us now. Good to see you, Dr. Kabir Adamu, and thanks as always. This is reminiscent of the 2002 Ikeja bomb blast. Here we are again, county losses, being in the dark. But first, help us make sense of explosive devices and the possible ways first of acquiring these in a country like Nigeria.
Thank you, Suleiman and Ngozi. There are, in simple terms, two categories of explosive devices: the commercial type that are used by various industries, including the mining, construction, and several other industries that, for one reason or the other, require commercial explosives. And then you have the military or security-related types of explosives. Now, the Ikeja incident was one that was associated with military explosives, as it were. The one in Ibadan, based on information that has been gathered so far, appeared to be commercial explosives that were mishandled. And of course, also acts of nature may have interfered, or even human acts. By these, I mean safety issues, poor handling of those commercial devices led to where we are. Not too long ago in Beirut, Lebanon, if you recall, a significant part of Beirut was leveled by the seaside because of a similar incident when chemicals, explosives were used for commercial purposes, maybe, were also detonated. And the result is almost, of course, the size of the explosion was much bigger than the Ibadan size. But my point is, poor handling of commercial explosives can result in the type of carnage that we saw in Ibadan, unfortunately. And the sad part, I would say, for me, is that we have a history of this in Nigeria. At the beginning of the insurgency in northeast Nigeria, it became very apparent that the improvised explosive devices that were being used by the insurgents in the northeast were actually, part of it was from fertilizer components. And so the government at that time, headed by the Office of the National Security Advisor, put in place a committee that came up with several measures for tracking and for reducing the access of this chemicals and materials that were used for explosive. I also know that at that time, mines and other blast components were also tracked and regulated. Now, I don't know between that time and now what went wrong, that we have commercial explosives in a residential area of the quantity that would lead to the type of blast that we have seen in Ibadan, based on the footage that we've seen.
Yes, indeed. And would you say this unfortunate tragedy, could have been averted? Because it does raise quite a number of questions. I mean, who qualifies, for licensing or permit for these devices? You do say that there are different categories, commercial and, otherwise. Help us understand the procurement procedure and who qualifies and who should not qualify.
First off, I think it starts with the registration component. Since these are, items that have been categorized as items of interest, they have a national security consequences, national safety consequence. The first stage, of course, is for whoever wants to acquire them would be registered in the Corporate Affairs Commission as a corporate organization. And then if, for instance, those items are being imported, I know an end user certificate is issued by the Office of the National Security Advisor. And there is a criteria before you acquire that end user certificate. Then if you go to the particular industry, the ministry that is in charge of that industry would also have specific regulatory requirements with a checklist that particular player in that industry will meet. So you see there are layers Then also, as far as I am aware, the police also has certain regulatory requirements that anyone who is involved in the use of those materials will have to meet. There are therefore several layers. It's also possible, even though I'm not aware as at now, that the state governments would also have some level of regulatory, powers to handle this matter. So there is no absence really of relevant government units and departments. I think the challenge has been one of compliance and of implementation of the required regulatory provisions for these things. And I think in this regard, it's absolutely important to mention the role that the National Assembly would play in this regard. Not too long ago, under the immediate past National Security Advisor, the National Assembly, in fact, the House of Rep, called on him to stop issuing licenses. This end user certificates that I mentioned, they refer to them as licenses because it became apparent to them that the level of exposure with regards to the commercial explosive was one that concerned them, and they did call on him. Again, I'm hoping that this committee that has been set up by the president would look into these issues and identify in clear terms where the gaps, are. And of course, every time I appear, in this platform, I talk about accountability. Yes. I hope that someone will be held accountable for this level of, carnage that we've seen in Ibadan.
And Kabir, quickly here, are there some form of explosive storage requirements?
Definitely there are. And I think this is one of the things that as a country we need to also expand. There are several, standards that have been provided. The UN has its own international and actually national standards for the storage of, depending on the type of material it is. And I would want to mention that there is an association, Risk Management Association of Nigeria, RIMSON. I'm a member of that. I'm actually a fellow of that. And there is a lot of expertise that we can provide to support, this particular committee and the work of government in ensuring the safety of materials. Not just today, we're talking about explosives. There are several other components that are safety hazards and risk to Nigerians that we need standards for their storage, for their usage, as well as for their deployment.
Very quickly, should they even be found in residential areas to start with?
Definitely not. The standards that I mentioned provide clearly that they should not be in residential areas. I mean, the fact that these are explosives, irrespective of the standards that have been provided and complied with, the element of human frailty and accidents that could occur makes it almost absolutely necessary that they should never be in a residential area.
Kabir Adamu, security expert, CEO, Beacon Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight.